Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Writers and Wonders podcast. I am Hirim or Yerim, and I'm here with Petra. And last time we talked about your next foray into querying or querying again. And of course, there's a lot that goes into querying and especially writing the query letter. And a big part of that are comps,
Yeah.
which I think I have like a love-hate relationship with comps.
As do
Um,
all the writers out there.
y-
Yeah.
yeah, because you feel like a certain pressure about finding the right comp.
The perfect
Um,
comp.
yeah,
I don't even know if it exists, but yeah.
yeah, you don't want to be like that jerk writer who's like, "Oh, my book is so unique. Like, there's nothing like that out there." That's not what you mean, but it is like there are a lot of books out there, and there is this sort of like balance that you're trying to find that you feel like your book fits well with, that can give obviously agents feel for the vibe, the also maybe the plot, also maybe like where does it fit in on the bookshelf, as they say. So we thought we could talk a little bit about how we've been going about finding comps and also maybe the sort of the information out there that we have absorbed that could be
hmm
helpful in spotting the right comps for your book, for your manuscript. I don't know, Petra. So for your latest query letter, how did you go about finding your comps? What have you been looking for?
Okay, so I've been going about it in a completely different manner, as opposed to what I did last time, because as I said it many times, I'm doing everything very differently than how
Mm,
I did last time. It really feels like everything I did back then is just complete trash. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit harsh, but
it's a learning curve, you know?
there is a learning curve for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, regarding comps, my comps again are completely different this time, precisely because I've been learning a lot about how to find your comps and how to approach this whole thing where you're trying to compare your manuscript to books existing out there already and being on the bookshelves. And this meant learning a lot about how my book one day could be marketable, um, where it fits on the market, and since we mentioned bookshelves, like where my book is going to hopefully sit one day next to this and this authors and this book.
I mean, you said you've been doing it differently. What
Mm-hmm.
was your starting point this time? I mean, I know, for example, when I listen to other agent podcasts or go through their social media and stuff, I mean, at the end of the day, publishing is a business,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's, of course, the important commercial aspect of it. So many agents have mentioned like a good point is to check Goodreads, Amazon, look for where you get the good ratings, maybe the most number of reviews, or not the most number, but you want to get probably a pretty good base line
Mm-hmm.
of reviews. Um,
Yes,
so I
I've
don't know if
been
that's something that you started with, or did you look for books based on the vibes or the plot first? Um,
I was starting with looking at genre.
mhm.
That seemed like a good point. I was also looking on Goodreads for sure. Um, and Goodreads is a good source, I think, for comps because, books have their kind of official categories, whereas, they are placed in certain genres, but
Mhm.
people can also make their own lists of however they want to, like saying the best magical realism books of 2025 or something. And that holds a lot of information as well, even if those are not like official sources. They are, just readers who tend to like the genre. But again, that is kind of maybe a strong source on its own because it comes from a reader of the genre and a person who might be part of your target audience one day as well. So I was definitely looking at Goodreads, and sometimes there's also just, your own natural choices of like how you see a book being published in your genre, and then you pick up that book. And then you just start reading and decide if it's going to be a good comp or not. And I think this is a point where we should highlight that if you're specifically reading to find a comp, it's okay to not finish a book. If, pretty soon you find that, okay, this is not going to be a good fit. And I think this is important to mention because when you're in that phase of looking for comps, you might have to go through, I don't know, like 20, 30, I don't know how many books, which can be quite, a high number. And you don't want to waste time. And as horrible as it sounds or might sound to some people, you can not finish reading a book.
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask you at some point during this episode, like, do you even bother necessarily reading some of the books at all? I have
Mm.
seen other writers post how you can use ChatGPT and different AI tools to like
Oh,
find comp titles. And I've
yeah.
heard, there are people who don't necessarily read. I think in my experience, I've tried to find suggestions via AI tools. And then, like, I think it's like, that's why I think sometimes it's a very imperfect tool because I'll like look for the book and it's actually the information is wrong, or like
Mhm.
the book doesn't actually exist. It's like someone's thesis paper or
Yeah.
yeah, like really random things. So I think that sometimes you have to be careful about myself personally. Like, I don't think I would feel comfortable comping without reading, like you said. And when you get to a point that like you maybe don't want to finish a book, then you're kind of like, maybe this is not the comp for me.
Mm.
When I started really writing my manuscripts and I was reading and like comps were always on the back of my mind, I was like, kind of like your approach to your enjoyment of reading changes because you kind of feel are like, oh, could this be a comp? Like, wait, I
Mhm.
don't see where exactly is the inciting incident in this one? Or like, is this vibe like, So I think it's fair to say like maybe you don't have to read the whole book. Maybe though, if you value the vibe because I think you can get information about plot sometimes, most of the time, without reading a book. But when it
Mhm.
comes to tone, when it comes to, I keep saying vibe, um,
It's
because
okay.
my vocabulary is limited right now. I need more coffee. Starbucks only makes the toffee nut latte at Christmas. Now we've run out of it. So I don't know. The rest
Mm.
of the year, I'm going to be sad until Christmas season starts again. But anyway, I do think that obviously reading the books will be helpful. But yeah, I do think it's fair. Like if you start reading and you're like, I'm not sure this is the right fit, like, and it's like that with the books reading in general, right? Sometimes I'll start reading a book and I'm like, I can't really finish this one.
Yeah, but I would say that if you decide to use a book as your comp title, then I would make sure to read that in full, like from start to finish, because you do want to put that energy into that. And I don't know, it just feels half-hearted if you don't. What I said before was only in those cases when you feel like, I'm never going to use this as a comp because it's just not a good fit, so I'm not spending more time with it.
Yeah.
But if you'll be using that as a comp, like definitely make sure to read it because I'm sure there are like wonderful summaries out there of books, whether you're using AI or something, or maybe a friend tells you what happens in the book. I don't know,
Hmm.
but make sure that you yourself truly read it, because I think that is the most authentic way to feel whether the vibe is there, whether the plot points are maybe following a similar structure as yours, or maybe there's that true similarity of your main character and the main character in that book. So there are many ways to go about choosing a comp. And so for that, you really have to read the book.
Yeah, and I would think that you would want to pick a comp that you want to finish reading, you know? And there's
Yeah.
something to be said about finding the tone and like the sort of like the emotional connection. And that I think you really get from reading. But it has changed sort of sometimes my outlook on which books I pick to read because there's only so much time that I have. So I want to kind of read it within my genre or read within what I think could be a good fit. Which brings me kind of to sort of this next important point about how recent, should
Hmm.
the comp titles be. I mean, some people say like up to 5 years is okay. I think that there are some agents who are a little bit more, I don't mean strict, but they want to feel like you are more current. So even in just like
Hmm.
the last 2 years, I think we've talked about this before and in the past. Like sometimes I like to reread books, like classics. And sometimes I'm like, why can't we comp like a Pride and Prejudice? Or why can't we go back to like circa 1990? But I think that
Yeah.
that is because I have like an emotional connection to certain books that I've read in the past and that I oftentimes like to reread. I'm like that with movies as well. Like I can rewatch certain movies like over and over again and still enjoy it. But yeah, there is obviously an importance for when it comes to being current in terms of like the business side of publishing. What is your kind of your comfort time range?
Now I think I prefer to choose something published in the last 2 or 3 years.
Hmm.
But maybe I'm saying that because now I feel like I'm very lucky. In a way, luck has nothing to do with it, but just me putting in the work. But let's call it luck. So I'm very lucky because I have two direct comp titles, and they both were published last year,
Mm.
which is I I don't know, never happens, I guess. So because of all the things that we mentioned, that all writers struggle with this so much, finding not only a good fit, but something that was published recently.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm saying that because now it seems so easy in a way. Now that
Yeah.
I have them, of course, but like when I first did querying, my comp titles were very different, and my approach to finding them, not even the approach, maybe let's just say that the results of my search for comp titles were, now I think, were very off. I was very focused on finding similar main characters,
Hmm.
and now I have that aspect in mind too, but I also look at plot and the overall vibe of the story. And yeah, so I'm going in with a more complex approach, I think, which
Hmm.
is probably going to benefit me in querying. And, for the first time, I was really, really off.
Yeah, I mean it's tricky to also feel comfortable thinking, okay, this is like the zone that I affiliate my manuscript with. Because sometimes you find out about books actually because they are on like certain, like you mentioned, the Goodreads like genre lists, but also
Yeah.
sometimes, there are so many of these book clubs out there. Everybody has a book of the month, and then, by that time, maybe it's gotten too big, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're kind of like, oh, are you going to be comping the next whatever Taylor Jenkins Reid or the Hunger Games or like things that are too big, or you also want to avoid things that are maybe a little too obscure, right? That are like
Yeah.
maybe an agent won't know that title right off the bat. When I read a book and I'm like, "Oh, I don't think it's, like, on any of these book club lists." And then, like, there was a time when I read and then it got on one and I was like, "No!" Like, now everyone is gonna read it or
Yeah.
So, there's like, a timing thing, and we've talked about, there's, this pressure of wanting it to be recent, but then, like, it has to be a timing that works with your sort of querying process as well. I mean, probably your comps are also different because you did your first querying back, I don't know, a couple of years ago, right? And so now those books are probably already, like, too old. Um,
Yes, that's true as well, yeah. They were
yeah.
completely wrong as well, but
Yeah.
regarding the timeline, they are off as well in that sense too. And what you mentioned about, trying to decide whether the possible comp is maybe too successful or maybe had a very small success. I had the same experience that you just described now, that it seemed to be a good fit, and then it was picked for, I think it was Reese Witherspoon's book club,
Mhm.
and it's not even a new one,
Mhm.
because sometimes these celebrity book clubs will just pick a book from the last couple of years and
Mhm.
they will put it on their list and give that badge to it, or on it, and then it's going to be a big success.
Yeah.
And I had the same reaction, that maybe then it's going to come off as me comping to, I don't know, like a very big name and a very successful book, because it is true that once it is picked for a celebrity book club, then it's going to be massively popular.
Mhm.
So you can't choose that anymore. But still sometimes, and this is what I want to talk about too, that as a writer, you have limited information about the success, the measurable business sense success of a book.
Mhm.
Whereas agents obviously have access to, how many books or how many copies were sold and things like that. So from one perspective, you know that you can comp yourself to J.K. Rowling or the Harry Potter books, because that makes so much sense, that that's such a, enormous book universe. And yeah, so that part is easy to understand, that you can't comp yourself to that person or their books. But other times I think it's harder to decide, and you keep asking yourself, can I comp this, or can I use this as a comp, can I not, like where is the line?
Huh.
Sometimes it's very hard to decide, and you're just pretty much on your own with that decision, unless you have maybe agent friends or published writer friends. Sometimes social media can be kind to you, so maybe you can post your questions out there and somebody will reply, and that might be useful. But I don't know, I think there's this agony of
Um,
how can I or can I not, like I don't want to appear as an egoistic, I don't know, person,
yeah,
thinking that
for
yeah,
sure.
this is the right comp for my book.
I also think sometimes when you read agent profiles, oftentimes what I find helpful is they will list, like, their recent sort of favorite reads. And it's very nice when sometimes you have read some of the books that they like.
Yeah.
And then that also gives you sort of an indication of, like, maybe not all of those books are like on these bestseller book club lists. Maybe some of them are a different sort of, I don't know, group or sort of zone. But maybe you're right. Maybe those agents have information that we don't, so that they're able to see, like, that these books have potential, or maybe they like that type of story. So that's something they're looking for, that they can kind of push, or they think that they would be able to sell well.
Yeah. I think as a writer, the most you can do is check out, and this is something you mentioned in the beginning, check out the reviews for a book, which is available to you on Goodreads and Amazon and other places. Also, the number of reviews and then the content of the reviews, whether it's leaning more positive or negative. Sometimes, although you have to be careful with that, you can, I think, get a sense of how successful the book is or was when, around the time it was published, looking at social media mentions, like, how many times or in how many posts will it come up in. So yeah, I think those are the places to look.
Yeah, and I think with all of this, there's also, like, that pinch of salt where, like, ultimately, you as the reader also have to like that book and feel that there is that connection. There are plenty of times when I read books and I either enjoy them or don't like them as much, and when I go on to Goodreads and I read the reviews, it's the feedback is actually different from my opinion, right?
Yes.
So that is also our pinch of salt where we have to think like, like there's only so much you can do to appeal to like everyone, right? Or every
Hmm.
tick every box and you know? I
Yes.
think just one last thing maybe we could also talk about is the topic of using non-book resources. It sounds like this isn't something you're gonna do for your querying process, but you often see like comps kind of merging with movies
Hmm.
or the music or the soundtrack or I think back when I was still on X/Twitter and seeing like these pitch war or what are they called? Pitch where people can like pitch on
Yeah,
X.
pitch wars and yeah,
Yeah, pitch wars.
things like that.
And people would come up with mood boards, like who
Hmm.
picked like photographic as sort of like comp vibes. I don't know. What do you think about doing something like that?
Right now, I'm not doing that, but I'm aware of this trend, and I think it's a fun approach, definitely.
Yeah.
So if you have good options there, like saying X meets Y, then sure, do it. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could make a pick here, but my problem with this, and I don't know if this is just me overthinking, as I always do, but there was a time when I was thinking of pitching my story as using two movie titles, saying that this is Midnight in Paris meets Devil Wears Prada,
Mm,
because my book has those magical elements that you would see in the movie Midnight in Paris. And if anyone listening or watching us doesn't know, it's a movie directed by Woody Allen. It's okay. I'm not going to explain the whole plot because that would take too much time. But there are many resembling elements between the movie and my book.
mhm,
One very evident piece is that Hemingway is in the book, but
mhm,
and there's this weird sensation around how can he exist in our modern timeline. And I also have Hemingway as a character in my book,
mhm,
the way he existed as a writer, as a soldier, as a all of those things. So there's that kind of connection beyond the magical setting. And the Devil Wears Prada part is because my main character is a PR agent, and there's a lot of elements of the word of PR shown in the book, from like famous people to influencers and how that whole world operates. And I also have a very important character in the book who is a fashion designer. And so there are a lot of bits connected to the word of fashion, to put it
mhm,
shortly. So there's that resemblance again. And the reason why I decided not to use this kind of way of comping is because I was afraid to use the example of Midnight in Paris
mhm.
because it was directed by Woody Allen, and
Yeah.
he's become a very uh, debated figure in the world
Yeah.
for the reasons we all know. And
Yeah.
so I wasn't sure uh, if I should go into that direction, you know,
Yeah.
because it's also, the question whether you can separate the art from the artist, right? And that's a whole debate on its own. And
Mhm.
even though the movie is, I think, great and would be a great comp,
Mhm.
I was afraid to mention that because of the director.
Mhm.
Also, I'm not sure because I don't think people are talking about that enough. that when you use movie comps or TV show comps, do you still have to keep to that timeline
Yeah.
of that last 2, 3 years? Because, okay, maybe I would be fine with The Devil Wears Prada now because the second part is coming out,
Yeah.
this spring.
Yeah.
But this other movie is like very old now. So maybe that would be a problem. So if any agents are listening, please tell us
Yeah.
do you, if we have to keep to that strict timeline of, you know, that last 2, 3 years when it comes to movie or TV show comps. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe there's also a question about like in your case, you mentioned maybe comping to, well, I guess there was also the original book, Devil Wears Prada came, I think it was it the 90s, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. Also, it's like then that could have been a case of maybe two movies, or are we talking about the book? Or, but I think it is. What the point of all of this discussion is that people are getting creative, right? I've
Hmm.
seen or heard about people making playlists that represent their book, their manuscript,
Uh-huh.
and creating a playlist and sending it to querying with that as well, which I think is
Oh,
like very creative and very cool. But also then, yeah, like, do you need songs from like the latest Taylor Swift album, or can you still go back to like Lover, like earlier eras, or can you,
I, th-
like,
I think if you're doing that, that's
yeah,
a very nice addition, but you
yeah,
can't skip over the fact that agents will need specific book titles
mm-hmm,
always as
mm-hmm,
comps, because this is what I see in agents talking about this all the time, that you can get very creative as much as you want, but you have to be able to at least mention, I don't know, maybe at least two books that would be direct comps, which is what I'm doing, by the way. I have two comps, and then I also mention, in addition, an author who very much has many books out there already, and
mm-hmm,
I think we share a similar vibe, and the themes that she's been discovering throughout her books is something that I do with my
mm-hmm,
book that I'm querying. And the only reason I'm not using one of her books as a specific comp is because, and I think that that's a trick, people. So this could be helpful for others as well. Is that the book from her that would be the best comp for me is an old one, so I cannot use that as a comp.
mm-hmm,
And her other books are quite okay, but I don't feel confident using those as a comp.
mm-hmm,
So, but this doesn't change the fact that sort of all her books and her author universe is very much carrying the same vibe as I am and my book does. So I decided to say, okay, my story blends this from this book with
mm-hmm,
this of this book. And those are my
mm-hmm,
specific examples. And then I say something along the lines of, it will also enchant readers of this author because
mm-hmm.
of these themes. So, and so I think that's a good kind of walk around or a
Yeah,
trick
like for
that you can.
lovers of so and so,
Yeah, so you can
yeah.
also come to an author if you can't come to their specific title, because I
Mm-hmm,
see this a lot. I'm not obviously I'm not the only one struggling with this. That you have an author that could be a good comp, but you just can't find a book from her because of the strict timeline, for example.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so you can still say that her readers or his or their readers would love your book, which is a good,
mm-hmm.
trick there. Obviously, you do need those specific comp titles as well. So do have, I think, at least two, but otherwise you can use this trick if you want to. I think that's, I wholeheartedly believe that this works.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, like the whole point of all of this is to help that agent see like where does your book fit in
Mm-hmm.
on that bookshelf, or how can they market it out
Mm.
there in the business, the commercial world, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we covered some good points about comping, an important part of querying. Yeah, and I think later on we'll discuss more related to querying and just writing in general. It was
Yes.
another good topic for our Writers and Wonders podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again to everyone who's listening. I'm
Or
sure,
watching.
or watching. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I just like really need a haircut, but it's a different story. Anyway, okay, good talking, and we'll catch up again later.
Yeah. Bye,
Okay, bye.
everyone.
Bye.